Hi, I'm Danesha of Classified Life, and today we're sewing Know Me 2135 View B. Let's go over the pieces you'll need. Pattern piece number 4, you're going to cut 2. This is your front piece. You're going to use your main fabric. Pattern piece number 5, you're going to cut 2. This is your back, again main fabric. Pattern piece number 6 is your yoke front. You're cutting 2. If you're lining with a different fabric, you can cut one of your main, one of your lining, or keep them the same. Pattern piece number 7, which is your yoke back, same thing. You're going to cut 2, one of lining, one of main, or the same fabric. And the last piece is pattern piece number 8, which is another guide for elastic B this time for the leggings. We're going to go ahead and set the elastic and the waistband to the side and get started with the pant legs. Alright, starting off with step 1, you're going to pin front to back. That's pattern piece number 4 and 5. Right sides together at the inner leg, so we are working on the shorter side, the inner leg. Stretching the back to fit the front between upper edge and notch. So it's going to take a little stretching, and then stitch using a double stitch seam. So what that means is you're going to stitch once and then stitch again close to that same seam within the seam allowance. And then afterwards we're going to trim it close to the second stitching and press the seam toward the back. And this is just to make sure that you all know when I'm on the wrong side of the fabric, and if you have a fabric that looks similar like mine, you'll know the front from the back. All right, do the same thing to your other leg and then meet me at the machine. Now that we're back from the machine, we're going to go ahead and trim any loose threads, as well as trimming close to your second set of stitches. All right, now that we've trimmed it, go ahead and grab your iron. we do need to press our seams towards the back before we sew the next step. You can also use a pressing cloth to avoid burning your fabric or leaving any marks if you find that necessary. I'm just going to give it a quick little press down the seam. All right, step number 2. We're going to stitch the center seam matching inside leg seams, leaving free above the dot. Stitch again 1/4 inch away in seam allowance along curve as shown. Trim close to second stitching. We won't sew above the dot. We'll start at the dot, go down and sew all the way around to the front, and then we're going to reinforce the crotch area from notch to notch with a second set of stitches 1/4 inch away from the first one. So we're going to, again, always right sides together. It's one leg, and we are working on this seam up here. Take your other one, lay it right sides together. Go ahead and clip right below the dot. Well, I'm actually going to start from this side, so I will stop at the dot. Match your notches, and then pin the rest. All right, once again, we're going to sew, stop at the dot, and then from our notch here to here, we're going to reinforce the seam 1/4 inch away. You want to make sure that your seam allowances are facing the back where we press them towards the back. All right, you want to make sure your seam is facing the back, both of your seams facing your back piece. And then I'm going to do a basting stitch right over this seam. I'm trying to get it aligned, so just quick stitch over, turn that up. I'm going to check to see if this is aligned through here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and sew now. Remember, we're going to start at the front and we're going to stop at the dot and back stitch. Now we're going to sew 1/4 inch away from this seam from notch to notch. Now we're going to sew again from this notch down to this notch at 1/4 inch away from the first seam. Alright, we're back from the machine. We have our center seam stitched And we've also stitched between the notches to reinforce. We're going to go ahead and trim our loose threads and trim our seam allowance. You want to again trim close to the second stitch. Take your shears and turn the fabric. And because we're not done up here, I'm just going to kind of cut at an angle. To make it easier, I'm just going to leave that for now. I'm not going to trim it. Moving on to step number 3, we're going to stitch the front to the backs at the side seams using a double stitch method. Same type of seam we used up here. You're going to sew your first row of stitches and then sew again close. Alright, you want to go ahead and turn your waistband to the top and then bring the other waistband over, and we're going to sew down our side seams. Okay, and just once again we're using the same double stitch method for the seam. So you're going to stitch at 5/8 of an inch and then again within the seam allowance. Alright, now that we're back from the machine, I went ahead and trimmed my seams. You don't have to, but I like it better that way, so I've trimmed those down close to the second stitching as well. We're gonna go ahead and move these to the side for now. And you wanna go ahead and grab your front and back yokes. You should have 2 fronts and 2 backs. For step number 4, we're gonna stitch 1 yoke front to 1 yoke back at the sides. And then for your lining, you're gonna stitch the remaining front and back the same way. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and mark the wrong side of my fabric with a quick X. And I'm gonna grab my front and back yoke, right sides together, match them up at the side seam. We have notches, so I'm always gonna pin at my notch first. That is wrong, right sides together. That's why you made X's. So start at your notch, pin, well, in this case, clip, your notch, I'm going to go ahead and do my lining as well so that I can take them both to the machine. All right, and we are back from the machine. We have our lining and our main sewn up for our front and back yokes. And now you're going to take the 2 right sides together. So I'm gonna just go ahead and turn this one and insert it into this one. So I would be seeing the X because that's the wrong side. So right sides together. You want to line up your side seams, and I'm going to just finger press this open. And line up the other one. After you line up your side seams, you can go ahead and line up your centers, center front and center back at the notch. And you can put a few more clips. Over here. So your center front. Again, gonna go slow here. Make sure those seams are opened out. Okay, now that we have stitched the top edge, you're going to take your elastic. For step 6, you're going to cut one piece of 1/2 inch wide elastic. You're going to use pattern piece number 8 to measure your elastic and transfer your markings. And then we're going to pin the elastic to the seam allowance, which is up here, what we just created, at the upper edge of the yoke, matching the centers and placing dots at the side seams and lapping ends at the center back. And remember, this triangle part is your back piece, so the center back is back here. And then you're going to stitch across the elastic at the center, side seams, and through the seam allowance only, keeping the yoke free. So what that means is we're going to go ahead and pin this here. Okay, hold on, get the right pieces. There we go. That is the center front. Clip that there. Side seams. And remember, we're only attaching to the seam allowance. Clip that there. Do the other one. Here. And then it says to overlap the ends of our elastic at the center back. So when you're going to sew, you're just going to overlap a bit and sew here. And you want to make sure you're making your stitches only within the seam allowance, so do not pass this line. It just looks like that. So now we're just going to turn it out. All right, you can go ahead and press your seam, and then we are going to align at the bottom so that we can baste our waistband together. So I'm just going to put some clips. And now we're going to baste. That means you're going to use the longest stitch that your machine has. Mine's is a 4. Sometimes I make my basting stitch a little less than the seam allowance. You can do whatever you prefer. You're going to go ahead and grab your pant pieces that we put to the side to move on to step number 8. Go ahead and grab your pants and turn them right side out. All right, you're going to stitch and you're going to stretch the yoke to fit onto the pant. And you're also going to break your stitching at the back center. That means you're going to stitch one side, stop, and then start again. And then you will stitch again a 1/4 inch away from the seam allowance. We're double stitching just like we did the legs. And then we will trim. So let me show you what this means. When you go to do the back at the sewing machine, you're going to want to sew. Well, first of all, let's line up that dot with your basting stitch at that corner right here. For this, I am going to grab a pin. I am going to grab a pin just to hold that in place right now. Okay, that's the best way to do this. All right, so when you get to stitching, you're going to stitch one side to the dot. That's where that stitching is, where the last stitching ends. You're going to stitch to that dot. You're going to stop, flip back over to the other side, and then you're going to pick back up right here at this stitching and stitch the other side. Another option is just starting on one side of this back and then ending at the other side. And don't forget to stretch your waistband. I would have preferred the waistband on top, but I'm already sewing, so I'm just going to leave it like this. And make sure that I'm stretching from the bottom. And again, if you're having any trouble with your knit and it not feeding through properly, you can always use your walking foot. And I know that this seam towards the back goes towards the back. And again, a little stretching. Make sure it feeds under. Take your time. sure I'm pulling the waist, making sure I'm pulling on the waistband at the bottom. Final stretch, and this is where we're coming to the other point. So you want to slow down here and make sure that you do this correctly. And stretch. And I'm coming to this where the stitching ends right here. At the dot. You're going to stitch again 1/4 inch away from the seam allowance. Now we're back from the machine and we have our waistband attached. The only thing left to do is the hem. There is a suggested way here where you would press up the hem on the lower edge of the leggings and stitch 1/4 inch away from the raw edge and then 1/4 inch below the first stitching. So the image shows you here. Essentially you would press up whatever your hem allowance is, and then it's saying to stitch 1/4 inch away from the edge and then another 1/4 inch below that. It's saying that if you keep the right side of your fabric against the machine, that will make it easier and the needle on top from the wrong side. So like so. This would be under the machine and you would be stitching from this side. You can also use a twin needle or a cover stitch machine, which is the way I will be finishing the hem. And that is all for our tutorial for Me2135 View B. Don't forget to hem your leggings. We are all done with View B. I'll catch you guys in the next one.